Okay, now we're into part three of this story of the Scythians and their connections to the Amazon warriors that you're like seeing here. This woman has a recurved bow and a quite fancy bridle on her horse and things, but well armored, breastplate, arm braces, shield, helmet. But notice how the helmet have that Phrygian curl, that pointed top that's on it too. Just got to point that out to you. And then if you'll look, they have the armband of the Sumerians, that rosette that's on there that quite often is down here on their arm, and people think that it's like a wristwatch that they have going on. Some people will call it that. And we see a crescent moon, the star that's on there, and that's a sign of Venus and women warriors. So, again, this is part three. If you haven't seen part one or two, there at the very end of this, you can go to the very end, the last 20-30 seconds, it'll show up in your top right hand corner, part one. You can go to that and then come back through these, and at the end of this one we'll be going the top left hand corner to go to part four and a finishing. But I do have another vid coming on too that has a connection with this too. I may put it out before this, looking at the information. Anyhow, tattooed Scythian warriors, descendants of the Amazons, part three. And now we're going to start looking at Pezeric burials and how they're a little bit different, but they have connections to these and words, a little bit of linguistics. The origin of the word Amazon may have come from the Iranian language. The word Ha-Mazon, a phonetic pronunciation, meant warrior, and the nomadic Scythians that migrated into Eastern Europe or European region are believed to have been Indo-Iranian tribes, so the etymology of the word does seem somewhat right in Proto-Indo-European languages. And there's also a connection too with Amazai, where you could get Amazon of the Greek zon, put that on the end of it early, but could work with Hamazai, and that shows you a connection there. But people aren't willing to try to make any connection like that because the Amazai are so far down the coast of North Africa, all the way out to the Pillars of Hercules there. But we talked of Hercules not too long ago. So, as the Scythian nomads moved across the area described in Herodotus' third story of their origin, a stratified society developed in which the farmers and the herders, the earlier inhabitants, were lower status, and the newer Scythian warrior class became the royal or ruling class. A caste system is set, and you have a bunch of farmers and regular people, and these warriors are leading them, and they are semi-nomadic. However, unlike most societies that are absorbed by a warrior-based culture, this one did not immediately or exclusively degenerate women to the lowest status. It seems that in their world there was a place for the warrior woman, a practice perhaps influenced by their female deities. Herodotus believed that the Sarmatians were the result of the merging of the Scythian and Amazon cultures, and so now we can see a connection to the Sarmatians, Samaritans, and Sumerians, perhaps, and how those names are so close together. They're just variations on a theme, cousins-ish, if you will. But whether this acceptance came from the merging of a society such as the Amazonians that had already had such practices, or it was inherent in the customs of the earlier nomads, is not clear. But archaeological evidence shows that women, both as warriors and as high-status individuals, existed in a Scythian society and similar cultures in the region of Pezeric. And so there's where the blend begins to seem to happen. And the Scythians buried their high-status dead in mounds called kurgans or tumuli, or you see them referring to the Issyk burials, Issyk. But then when you hear in the Bible somebody important named Isaac and his sons that came from that, and then you find out that Isaac's sons are related to the Saxons, then that starts to put other things together too. So whenever they're buried here, though, the tree worship and things goes with them, and you can see this idea of Dumuzi being reborn out of a tree. If I read the next sentence, the dead were laid out often as if asleep in a hollowed out log facing the east, quite often covered with red ochre. Quite often near them they would have certain artifacts, and we just got through doing our cannabis history type of video there, and I don't know if it came out before this or not, but here's another pointing to that exact fact in one literature that you can find. Grave goods included fine clothes, jewelry, food, cannabis, hand mirrors. They just kind of blur right over that cannabis. Also carried by the followers of Hathor. So these hand mirrors, does that go together? Well, there's other people that are listed as being vain and having mirrors and things like that back in the day too, and what that meant. Mirrors are a strange thing. I've got a video that I haven't put out yet because I can't clip it up bad enough for them to quit flagging it, but it shows the first meeting of a certain tribe in Erie and Jaya and showing them mirrors and things and stuff, and these people are just totally blown away. It's a pretty cool meeting, but you always worry about things like this. Anyhow, so they find horse tack that's with these women, bows, swords, and shields, entire chariots, and often other humans and horses. The horses were sacrificed by an axe blow and then buried with the deceased, and it could be they used these sacred weapons for just this exact purpose. A later excavation, such as the one at the Pisek mummy, known as the Ice Maiden, excavated by Natalia Polsmak, has shown that at least in this instance the horses were older rather than younger stock, suggesting a hint of practicality, possibly whenever killing the stock, like whenever they would sacrifice some to them, it would always be the old horses and ones they had around that weren't maybe the best of. But then again, people that had more importance got best of. In fact, people would give their horses to go with that. And a lot of these elder burials contain horses. And a lot of the ancient burials contain people to die along with the king or important people to be with them in the afterlife, because they knew that's the holiest guy most connected that we know. And if I go with him, I'll at least show up in the Elysian fields, which is kind of where that comes from in here too. And this idea of this open roaming land that was much different than Greece and that area was even at that time. So, the bodies were mummified in a complex process too, which is very revealing, and people don't talk about this. But it involved the removing of internal organs, packing the body cavity with aromatic herbs and spices, and then embalming the flesh with oils and resins. And you saw that tattooed one in the very first one that we showed there, and how well kept that mummy is. And then we find mummies up north in here, and all the mummies that are around those ancient pyramids nobody wants to talk about that are up there, and all of the Sakasuni and the people that live up in the Proto-Indo-European lands that are there. Man, I should have had a cup of coffee before I got started on these. Anyhow, so they do something short of natron, it seems. This is almost exactly what's being done just not long after this in Egypt. But those are believed, of course, to have been buried out in the desert originally, on their sides in the same exact same way. But yet, whenever they moved a burial ground, if they found one of these, then they would be like, wow, look, they're perfect almost still. They're prepared. They're like beef jerky now, and they don't weigh that much either. And this is the the preserving of the body. It doesn't just go away to bones, but here's some essence of the person that doesn't rot to the point the bones are there and then go away. And this shows a connection that might go with all that idea too. Some of the kurgans also filled with groundwater and subsequently sealed the mummies in ice, which further preserved all of the burial goods. Well, actually, they kind of ruined them here, but then after that initial freeze, it doesn't get ruined over time and stuff. That's kind of like Utsi, the Iceman, and how he's preserved for so long. And you thaw him out, and he doesn't look too much different than these people, huh? Anyhow, the craftsmanship of the goldwork, textiles, leather items, and wood carving is exceptional and equally for both male and female burials. And indeed, they have well-made fabrics, and all of these ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans and the people all up through that area there had very good fabrics, and it looks like they had brought an idea of how to make good fabrics with it. They didn't make jackets as nice as that, though. Royal Scythians were also tattooed, and apparently those tattoos attested for their elite status. Their tattoos are almost modern in appearance and were created not by the most common ancient method, which is sewing dye-soaked thread under the skin, but instead they used that tapping puncture method. And that technique allowed the artist to create stylized designs in the shapes of goats, horses, deers, and leopards, or perhaps tigers. A tattoo stencil, or a pattern that's used for creating these designs, was actually found in one of the burials. The males and females wore the same designs, and there's also evidence of more medicinal tattoos that were usually only lines and little symbols. Among the Scythians, it is relatively easy to separate the therapeutic tattoos from the decorative because they had such advanced tattooing skills, like you saw on that one body there. And you see that same type of tattooing done on Libyans in the Egyptian art. And I've shown you Egyptians with ancient tattoos. So all this is... Hello? Knock, knock. Anyhow, there are many very interesting Scythians and Patrick burials, and it would take a book to describe them all, but some contained women, or men, and women together, who were buried as warriors with bows, shields, and swords, as well as their horses. It's apparent that this society accepted the participation of women in warfare and or allowed them the honors afforded to such a status, and perhaps it is this very custom that earned these people the title of barbarian, because of the cultures that surrounded them found the very thought of women in such roles as unthinkable, even mythical. So, what you let your women fight, then that's a bad thing. And it looks like you're a wuss, or you don't have enough army, or what's going on. But then again, these women would probably rather die than be taken over into slavery by you, and all these type of things that might happen to them later. Quite often, a lot of them killed themselves after their husbands had died and things, and it's really not so cool. But then again, it's maybe the better option out of the two, which is a terrible thing to think of when you think about these ancient societies and how things happened. And when we talk about barbarian, though, that had to do with barbers. That's where we get the word barber from, and barbers have to do with hair cutting and beards and so on. And Barbarossa is red beard, and so it had a lot more to do with that than it had to do with people being like, ugh, and I shake a stick at you or anything crazy, like we probably originally thought. A barbarian probably doesn't have much going on. Hairy caveman still, right? No, it's just they didn't speak Greek and so on. Greeks called people all kinds of names and stuff that they had made up. In fact, they named damn near everything, didn't they? It has long been an accepted practice in anthropology to draw inferences about people and gender role within a society based on the way they're treated in death and burials. And there must have been some degree of equality within this society, or a whole lot of respect for women, and wanting to put them in as warriors in there too. Were they thinking that they were going to a happy hunting ground, or was that happy hunting ground going to still end up having to involve fighting or conflict at this time. Anyhow, part 4 coming up in your top left-hand corner, and we'll be headed there in a moment. Like, share, and subscribe before you go if you aren't already. Throw a comment down there, as it might be a few minutes before the next one starts, and we'll be headed off. Click up there in that top left-hand corner, and we'll see you there. Peace.